Okay, we need to talk. Kevin Feige, this is for you.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
I had written this entire video out, and I was ready to film it, then you dropped the absolute disaster that was Comic-Con 2024. And now things are even worse. So going into this video, I understand that some things in the MCU's near future have changed, but I don't really think that invalidates any of the points I'm going to make, because my problems are with what's been wrong with the MCU in the past few years and what's been making it so unsatisfying. And the new direction is not fixing anything. So now back to the video as planned. What the fuck is even going on? And no, I'm being serious. Can anyone tell me what's happening in the multiverse saga? I don't think anyone knows. And I'm not just talking about certain outside complications that have thrown the future of the MCU into confusion. I'm talking about before that, so don't bother using that as an excuse. See, from the end credits of the first Iron Man, we kind of knew what these movies were going to be doing and what they were going to be giving us. We knew that an Avengers project was going to happen eventually. Iron Man 2 showed us we were getting Thor. Thor showed us that Loki was going to be the main villain. Captain America ended with him being recruited by S.H.I.E.L.D. Then we got the Avengers, and the after credits scene of that showed us that Thanos was going to be the big threat. Then the rest of Phase 2 made it clear that we were going to have to wait for him, that the events of those movies were building up to some kind of master plan with the Infinity Stones. Once we hit Phase 3, it was clear that the clock was running out. Shit was about to hit the fan, and we were spending our last moments with the MCU and the characters within it as we knew them. Because after Endgame, things were never going to be the same. In my last video, I talked about how important it is to be clear with your audience. People don't want to be confused about these fucking movies. Asking people to go to the theaters multiple times a year and watch a bunch of TV shows is a pretty big ask. If they don't know what's even happening, they're not going to care enough to do it. People want a good guy and a bad guy and a story that makes sense. So apparently Kang is the new cosmic threat that the Avengers have to team up to face, but who is he and what does he even want? Like, what is the threat exactly? Unlike Thanos, every new piece of information we get about Kang makes the overall story more confusing or diminishes his impact as a villain. Like, he's a force to be reckoned with, or at least one version of him is. Or maybe he's powerful because there's like a million different versions of him. But I think they're all just supposed to be fodder. But it kind of also looks like they're all dimension conquerors, at least I think that's what they said. Or maybe it's like only these three that are that powerful, except they were all afraid of the main one, but he got killed by Ant-Man. What am I supposed to think about this guy? Thanos was always going to be a tough act to follow up. He was basically instantly cemented as one of movies' classic villains. And to be fair, there was a lot of potential with Kang, a genocidal, unstoppable, time and dimension traveling warlord. I thought Jonathan Majors was a good pick. I even liked him whenever he would show up. But Kevin Feige and the MCU have quite literally not made a single comprehensible choice surrounding the character. As of now, Kang has appeared in I think 2 MCU projects, Loki and Ant-Man. 2 stories that feel very disconnected from the main world and events of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Loki takes place in a bunch of different timelines and dimensions, and Ant-Man takes place in this like green screen Spy Kids world. The Infinity Saga worked because we knew it was going to connect back to the main characters eventually. An Infinity Stone could pop up anywhere on Earth with Ultron or out with Thanos in space. You saw the looming threat and how it was inevitably going to connect back to the main story and characters. Structure. I'm sure you're familiar with the word. It's how you build things. You make a building with a weak structure and it's going to be wobbly and it's going to collapse. You also need structure for your stories. In a movie, you use a 3-act structure. The same goes for all-encompassing entertainment franchises. You develop a structure and it makes it easier for the audience to absorb and understand information. You can have a really great story with good characters and good moments, but if you structure it in a confusing way, the general audience is going to have a difficult time understanding what's going on. The MCU was the first franchise to really take a swing at the cinematic universe formula, and they kind of just lucked into accidentally perfecting the structure. It just seems so obvious, and when things look simple, you have a tendency to just take them for granted. But so many other people have tried and failed, so I guess it can't be that easy. The thing is, as soon as Phase 3 ended, the MCU just immediately dropped the structure they've been using since the very first movie. Phase 5 ended without an Avengers film, and now it just feels like a random set of movies, which is bad because there's literally 18 projects inside of it. The project choices don't seem to be following any kind of coherent story either. We got a Black Widow movie, a movie about a character who already died. Then we got Eternals, a movie that was widely disliked and just introduced way more questions and didn't feel like it was part of the multiverse saga at all. Phase 4 needed its "I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative" moment, something that would let us know what was going on. I mean, we were bound to get one eventually, right? First, we opened up with WandaVision, a show that seemed to be toying with the concept of the multiverse, but then it ended, and we didn't really get any answers. Then we got Loki, and when it ended, it seemed like things were finally going to be taking shape. But it didn't have any impact on the rest of the movies at all. Next was Spider-Man No Way Home, but that didn't really answer anything either. Finally, we had Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I mean, this had to be the one that was going to set the record straight. Multiverse was literally in the title. But no, it just ended and things weren't really any more clear than they were before. The MCU is basically a TV show. I mean, I know that isn't a unique way of putting it, but I think it's the best way to illustrate the structure of the MCU as a whole. See, in TV shows, you usually have a main character, like Jack Bauer in 24, or Don Draper in Mad Men. A lot of times, you'll even have more than one main character, like Walter White and Jesse Pinkman. Even when the story drifts away from these main characters, you see how they're still in the center of the larger plot.
It's all about me.
See, the MCU had their own main characters too. It was the Avengers, the main ones. Cap, Iron Man, and Thor. And, kind of the Hulk too, but certain licensing issues kept them from ever taking the spotlight. Even as the team grew, bringing on new characters like Scarlet Witch and the Falcon, and the MCU introduced more characters like Doctor Strange and the Guardians of the Galaxy, they always kind of felt more like side characters in the larger story. At the end of the day, it was always going to be about Iron Man, Cap, and Thor, and the movies reinforced this idea. The three of them lead the three main plots that take place in Infinity War, and they all have a moment to team up together to fight Thanos in Endgame, because they're the main characters, and he's the main bad guy. But after Endgame, we lost Iron Man and Cap, and honestly, I don't see Thor taking a leading role anytime soon. So finding a new trio to lead the movies isn't only a good idea, it's necessary. I mean, we followed the original Avengers for 10 years, but the thing is, you can't just plop 16 characters in front of me and expect me to know which one is the main character without you putting in any work at all. You need to get the audience ready. You need to pick these characters, and you need to groom them. See, grooming can be a good thing too. It's not just something that YouTubers do to minors. Topical reference. Maybe a better analogy would be anal penetration. You need to use the lube before you slip it in. Otherwise, it's going to hurt and people aren't going to like it. Changing leads can be jarring, and that can even be a good thing if you do it the right way. Spoilers for a 10-year-old show, but Game of Thrones ended their first season by killing off the main character. It was surprising, and without proper preparation, it could have killed the show. But we had spent enough time with Jon and Daenerys and Tyrion that when it became time to follow them, it just felt natural. It wasn't confusing because the show had been getting us ready for it. We just didn't know it. A bad example of moving away from a main character is in The Office. Pretty much everyone agrees the show went downhill after Steve Carell left. That's because Michael Scott's character was holding the whole show together. And the story of The Office isn't exactly what I'd call complex, but it's the little things sometimes. The Office spent the rest of its run trying to figure out who it should focus on. It went through this period where it shuffled around some bosses. Then at one point Ultron was the new boss. Eventually we landed on Andy, but by then the audience was confused. They didn't know how they felt anymore. The magic was all gone. It slipped away. Sound familiar? Okay, so maybe they didn't do a good job of setting up the new leads, but maybe they're just really fantastic picks. Can anyone tell me who they even are? I mean, it's not Scarlet Witch. I don't think it's Shang-Chi or Moon Knight or Ms. Marvel. I mean, I don't think it's any of the Eternals. The Avengers isn't just some random team in the world. They're the nucleus that the entire MCU is built around. So whoever the new leads are going to have to form the backbone of the Avengers. A lot of the drama and conflict is going to come from their decisions and personalities. So who could it be? Maybe it's Spider-Man or Doctor Strange. I mean, he really doesn't seem like the team player type. And Spider-Man's last movie is about him moving away from like the larger events and teams and learning to just be his own hero. I can see them going with Sam Wilson's Captain America. I guess we'll have to see how his movie does at the box office. There was a lot of speculation before Chadwick Boseman's death that Spider-Man, Captain Marvel, and Black Panther were going to be the new faces of the MCU after Endgame. But if you want my honest opinion, I don't think there was ever a concrete plan for what they were going to do. Sure, I mean, I bet that Kevin Feige and whoever else runs the MCU were sitting in a boardroom going, I think it would be nice if Spider-Man and Captain Marvel were making us the most money, but I don't think they ever really understood what made the original three such great choices. Tony, Steve, and Thor weren't just three random characters that they picked and just happened to work out for no reason. They were the best possible options they could have gone with. But what made them so good? Sure, they've got cool powers and they've consistently been premier members of the Avengers over the years. But the movies didn't just pick them and call it a day. They put in work. The three of them had camaraderie. You like seeing them on screen together because there was conflict with their characters and they seemed like three people who really knew each other. They didn't always understand each other or get along very well, but they were professionals, and when it came down to it, they were able to work together and set aside their differences, and they earned each other's mutual respect. And most importantly, it took time. It started out with a fight in the woods, then arguments on the helicarrier. Then at the end of their first team up, they learned to respect each other's strengths. When they came together as a team, we had watched them grow into it in a compelling way. This is what I meant when I said they should have been setting up some heroes to be the new leads before Endgame. Instead, we're left with a lot of nothing. What is the dynamic between Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Captain Marvel? Can anybody tell me? Have they ever said a single word to each other? I think Black Panther said "give it to me" to Spider-Man one time in Endgame, or was that Captain Marvel?
Hey, Peter Parker. You got something for me?
But what about the rest of the universe? Does anyone really want to see Moon Knight team up with She-Hulk? Or Shang-Chi help the Eternals? Have any of these people ever talked to each other before? Do they even feel like they're in the same universe? Are they ever going to talk to each other? The last thing you need to think of is what dynamic the three of them are going to cause when they work together because of who they are. Cap is like a strategist and a leader and an inspiring guy. Iron Man is an experienced hero. He has a lot of money so he can fund the operation. And Thor's like the powerhouse, but he also was like a magic alien from space who knows a lot about mystical stuff. So what now? I mean, I guess they'll probably pick Sam Wilson to be like the new leader of the Avengers. Can anyone tell me why that's a good idea other than he's carrying Captain America's shield? Doctor Strange works too, I guess, because he's like magic, but he's also very powerful. He's kind of like Thor in that way, I guess. And I have a feeling the last one is like maybe Captain Marvel. I don't really see them having a lot of faith in that decision, after the Marvels, but we'll have to see what happens. I just can't see who else they could have gone with. Now you've got three characters who have been in the MCU for up to 10 years, and I don't think any of them have ever said a single word to each other. Like, is Sam gonna step up and lead the Avengers for like 2 movies that come out in 2025 and 2026? And then just step down and retire because the saga is over and it's time to introduce the new characters? That doesn't sound like a good idea. Endgame was 6 years ago and we've gotten almost 30 projects since then. And so far we don't know who the faces of the universe are, what's happening, or why we should care. And you can say that the MCU is trying to go through a more chill, like transition period after Endgame. And honestly, I think that could have been a good idea. A couple small projects that were focusing on individual characters and kind of just giving a break from the large overarching story. By the end of Phase 1, we had 6 movies. We knew who the villain was, who the heroes were, and what the story was gonna be. There were 23 projects between Iron Man and Endgame. We've had 25 since then. And what have we accomplished? What progress have we made in the multiverse saga? One of the reasons it's so confusing is because there's just too much going on in the MCU right now. I mean, I bet you've all lost track of how many subplots the MCU is currently running. The Celestials came to Earth and took some of the Eternals. There's some kind of mystery surrounding Shang-Chi's 10 things. Elaine from Seinfeld is making like a Suicide Squad Avengers. Kingpin is back. We're getting a Young Avengers at some point. But what does all of this have to do with anything? Is it even relevant? Do we have to pay attention? Do we have to care? Or are we just going to hear about it vaguely for 6 years, then have it abruptly end out of nowhere with no previous thought or care put into it? I try to refrain from telling people what multi-million-dollar franchises could have done to make more money. What's done is done, and I ain't here to write fanfic. But I feel like this is the best way to make my point easily digestible. So in my humble opinion, this is what I think the MCU could have done post-Endgame to make things more, understandable. First off, like I said earlier, we're going with Sam Wilson's Captain America, Doctor Strange, and Captain Marvel as the new leads. We're going to put all 3 of them in Infinity War. They're going to work together, get some scenes together. They're probably just going to take place in Captain America's story, help him fight some bad guys and just get a feel of how they are as a team. They don't need all the screen time in the world, but just a couple moments of them working together and not really getting along. Open Phase 4 with Loki, give us a tease at Kang. Then move on to the smaller and more personal stories. Hawkeye, Falcon the Winter Soldier, Miss Marvel, WandaVision. Make it clear in those movies that the Avengers ain't a thing no more and that eventually someone's gonna have to step up to the plate. End Phase 4 with an Avengers movie. Some villain comes out of nowhere. It can be anyone, like Annihilus or Ultron, but basically, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, and Sam Wilson, Captain America, have to team up to fight them off. They form some kind of new Avengers that has Shang-Chi and Spider-Man and Ant-Man and some others on it. And the movie ends with them officially forming the new Avengers. Then a credit stinger shows that Kang was secretly behind the attack. He sent the bad guy out as a feeler, but the Avengers beat their ass pretty easily. He can say some bad guy stuff about how he needs to prepare because this is the sacred timeline. So he's coming. And, he wants to do bad stuff because he's a bad guy. Move on to Phase 5 and just go all out with the multiverse stuff. Do Doctor Strange, do Deadpool, do Spider-Man. You can even shove Kang in a few of these movies with the slight caveat that he has to win when he shows up. Now the build up to the multiverse saga is that the heroes are getting themselves tangled up in the multiverse, and this big blue asshole keeps coming out, beating their asses, and then leaving them barely alive. And, he keeps giving them warnings when he does. He tells me, he's like, hey, if you surrender and you come with me, when I destroy this timeline, I'll let you and your family and everyone you care about live. But if you don't, I'm going to destroy this timeline with you and all your friends in it. So eventually they'll get to talking and they realize that they've all been fighting the same guy and that he's going to be coming here pretty soon. So they need to learn to step up and beat his ass. See, in this version, we know who the heroes are, who the villain is, and the threat is very clear and understandable. And the dilemma he's posing to the heroes shows the audience that everything's connected. But most importantly, there's some kind of build-up to the movie. Sadly, I think it's too late for the multiverse saga. But I think the MCU could bounce back in the future. However, the MCU is going to have to return to familiar territory. I don't believe they need to do the same thing over and over again. Change is a good thing, but there's some things we just shouldn't stop using, like punctuation marks and seat belts. Now that that's all said and done, we need to address the elephant in Hall H. Robert Downey Jr. is back, and instead of Iron Man, he's playing Doctor Doom, and Avengers Kang Dynasty is now Avengers Doomsday. What an absolutely moronic decision. If your plan was to insult the audience as much as possible, mission accomplished. Only the modern MCU could take a situation I thought couldn't get any worse and then manage to fuck it up way more. This is the biggest disaster since my dog disappeared 23 years ago on September 11th, 2001. As shit of a job as the MCU has been doing to set him up, Kang has kind of been all we've had for the MCU post-Endgame. The few breadcrumbs we've gotten here and there have shown that some version of him in some capacity was going to be the big villain of the MCU going forward. And they've been touting Kang Dynasty as like the next big Avengers movie for a few years now. You can't just switch him out in the fourth quarter with a more popular character whose existence has never been acknowledged or referenced in the universe. All these years of confusion and vague plot lines have just been for nothing. It's all a waste of time, like a big slap in the face. Are you telling me you really think people aren't gonna be at least a little bit confused when Kang never shows up ever again? It's like telling a joke with no... And finally, people have some basic intuition, even if they don't fully understand it. We can all feel the general lack of care for the recent Marvel movies, and everyone can kind of pick up on the fact that the franchise is in dire straits right now. We pick it up through like cultural osmosis. Now, I don't know if I use cultural osmosis right there, but you all get the point. When you make a huge announcement about your new big villain, and the across-the-board response from everybody is, wow, they must really be getting desperate now, you are in deep shit. But who knows? Maybe the directors of The Gray Man can save us. People really loved that movie, I think.